My fiancée told me she was working late. 1 hour later, I saw an Instagram photo of her sitting on her boss's lap. If you were my age, how would you react to that photo? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm Dave Cole, 34. It was a Tuesday in early September, the kind of Seattle evening where the sky carried a wet heaviness, even when rain hadn't yet begun to fall. I was home in my townhouse in Queen Anne, a place that overlooked the city just enough to remind me why I had chosen to stay here. The streets below buzzed faintly with traffic neon signs flickering against the mist, while inside my walls the silence wrapped me like armor. Samantha had texted earlier right before 6. Running late, big push tonight. Don't wait up. Nothing unusual. Marketing thrived on last-minute pushes. I replied with a simple thumbs up, set my phone down, and returned to my book. The kitchen still smelled faintly of garlic from the pasta I had made for one. A half glass of water sweated on the counter. My evenings were predictable, almost ritualistic. Eat, read, sometimes organize files. Predictability suited me. In compliance, predictability was survival. Then my phone buzzed. Instagram. Kevin, a junior associate in marketing, had posted a group photo. A night out, no caption beyond team night out on Pike Street. I clicked without thought, expecting nothing more than blurry faces and cocktails. But there she was, Samantha. Not across the table, not on a bar stool, on Nathan Price's lap. Nathan, her direct manager, a senior figure in marketing, known for his smooth presence and casual arrogance. He had one hand around her waist, casual as if claiming property. She tilted her head toward him, laughing, her red blazer vivid even in the dim light. Timestamp 7:30. Location tag, a well-known Pike Street bar. It had been less than an hour since she said she was still at the office. I zoomed in. My thumb trembled not from rage, but from focus. Every pixel was evidence. Samantha's smile, Nathan's hand, the cocktail in her grip. The background noise of celebration made it worse, not better. This wasn't a hidden corner or a private booth. This was public, loud, careless. I took a screenshot. Then another, saving them to multiple folders, phone storage cloud, even the external drive tucked into my desk drawer. Habits die hard. In my role, evidence was sacred. And just like that, what could have been dismissed as suspicion turned into certainty. Strangely, I felt no explosion of anger. No shouting, no urge to throw my phone. What I felt instead was a settling, a centering. Years of watching people think they could bend rules without consequence had prepared me for this. Samantha was just another subject who believed she was immune. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, letting the clarity sink in. She thought she was at a bar having fun. She thought her little lie, working late, was harmless. What she didn't know was that I was the one person in the building trained to see through harmless lies. I walked into my study on the second floor. The space was orderly, dual monitors, locked cabinets, binders arranged in precise sequence. On the wall hung a framed certificate of my compliance accreditation, proof of years spent memorizing codes others ignored. I opened my laptop, created a new folder. The cursor blinked at me. I typed case file S, read, and N price. The words looked clinical, almost detached. But I knew what they meant. It wasn't just names. It was the beginning of a process that ended careers. I dragged the screenshot in, renaming it Exhibit A Instagram photo. Metadata intact, timestamp, location, tag, source account. I had taught new hires to always preserve metadata. Now I was teaching myself. I opened a blank note file. Typed, subject Samantha Reed, marketing. Observed in intimate contact with direct manager Nathan Price, off-site, non-business context. Conduct inconsistent with fraternization policy, conflict of interest rules, potential misuse of company resources. The words came easily because I had written them in different contexts for different people. But this time the subject was my fiancée. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt something sharper, vindication. The small doubts I had ignored now had shape. The overtime excuses, the vague answers, the sudden bursts of energy after late nights, they had formed a puzzle I didn't want to see. Now the picture completed itself. And unlike love, evidence doesn't lie. I returned to the living room, phone in hand. Outside the window, the Space Needle glowed faintly through mist. People filled bars, couples walked streets, life moved on. Inside my home, I sat with a single photo that changed everything. I didn't text her, didn't call, didn't ask why. Because I didn't need why, I had proof. And proof is enough. Hours crawled. Midnight came. Rain began soft at first, then heavier drumming against glass. I set my phone on the table watching droplets race each other down the pane. Samantha would return smelling of alcohol, inventing a story about overtime. She would expect me to nod, to trust, to move on. I almost pitied her, because while she was sipping cocktails on Nathan's lap, she had forgotten who she was engaged to. Not just a man, but the man who wrote the code of conduct for half the company. I closed my eyes, letting that truth settle. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it starts with a single file name on a screen, and tonight it started with hers. Seattle spring of 2020. I was 32 then, not yet carrying the quiet weariness of the man I would become 2 years later. The company had organized a mixer downtown to celebrate a new product launch and welcome fresh hires. It was the kind of event I usually endured more than enjoyed noise alcohol, and the kind of loose boundaries that made compliance officers like me twitch. The venue was a converted warehouse along the waterfront, strung with Edison bulbs and filled with the thrum of music. On one side, the marketing department dominated the space, loud, colorful glasses clinking. On the other, compliance staff clustered near the quieter tables, speaking in measured tones, careful even in casual conversation. That was where order met chaos. Samantha Reed swept in with the marketing crowd, red dress bright under the low lights. She was 29, full of energy, the kind of presence that drew eyes without effort. She laughed, wide head, tilted back, her voice carrying over music. I was standing near the bar, nursing soda water. She noticed me almost immediately, maybe because I looked out of place, or maybe because she enjoyed toying with people who did. She crossed the floor in a few confident strides, leaving her group behind. "You're compliance, right?" she asked. Smile mischievous. "The people who write all those scary codes no one reads." I raised my glass slightly. "Senior Director of Compliance. We don't write scary codes. We write survival guides." She laughed loud enough that nearby heads turned. "Survival guides, dramatic. Only when ignored," I said evenly. She clinked her glass against mine. "Well, maybe you can teach me to survive." That was Samantha. Every line delivered with a wink, every word shaped to entertain. And I, a man built on rules and procedure, felt both irritated and intrigued. Over the weeks that followed, we grew closer. She liked to tease me for my neatness, joking I probably alphabetized my socks. Yet she also slipped her expense reports onto my desk, asking me to make sure they look okay. At first I thought it was banter. Later I realized she admired the stability I embodied. For my part, I convinced myself I could ground her chaos. I told myself love was about balance, her laughter filling the spaces my order left empty. I ignored the way she spoke of shortcuts in campaigns, bragging about skipping procurement channels, brushing off compliance rules as speed bumps. When I raised an eyebrow, she would kiss me mid-sentence, laughing, "Lighten up, Mr. Rulebook." I let myself believe affection outweighed misalignment. There's a saying in compliance: patterns repeat until corrected. Looking back, I see the pattern was obvious. In late 2020, at another company gathering, I watched Samantha chatting with Nathan Price, her senior manager. At the time, it seemed ordinary. He was older, polished, the type who enjoyed being admired. She leaned in when he spoke, eyes bright. I dismissed the thought quickly. Nathan was her boss, nothing more. I told myself not to be paranoid. That dismissal would become one of my greatest errors. By 2021, our relationship accelerated. Samantha wanted permanence. I had the townhouse, the career, the salary, all signals of stability. Proposing felt like the logical next step. She said yes with tears in her eyes, posting the ring photo online within minutes. Her caption, "Can't wait to marry my best friend." The comments poured in, praising the ring, the setting, her smile. Few mentioned me. We settled into engagement life. Dinners in my townhouse, weekends of wine and chatter. She scattered clothes across chairs, left mugs half full on counters. I picked them up without complaint. Her chaos filled the house, and I let it. But even then, the signs lingered. She took more team nights than necessary. She spoke of Nathan often, sometimes praising, sometimes mocking. She described him as demanding but brilliant. I told myself she just needed to vent. Love makes men rationalize. Compliance had trained me to spot inconsistencies in spreadsheets, false statements in interviews. But in my own life, I chose blindness. It wasn't until September 2022, staring at that Instagram photo, that I realized the mixer had foreshadowed everything. Samantha's laughter across the bar, Nathan's presence in her orbit, my belief that discipline could steady disorder, it was all there, the blueprint of betrayal waiting to be built. The townhouse was hushed, except for the tapping rain on the glass and the low hum of my computer fans. Midnight had long passed, but my body felt alert, sharpened. The photo from Pike Street was open on my screen, its glow casting pale light across my study. I had stared at it enough to memorize every detail. Samantha's red blazer, Nathan's smirk, the casual placement of his hand, the timestamp 7:30 p.m., the location tag, a downtown bar. Less than an hour after she had texted me about deadlines, I wasn't replaying it out of jealousy anymore. I was cataloging it. I opened my secure folder, the one I used for audits that never saw the light of day until investigations demanded it. The interface blinked back empty. The cursor waited. I typed case file S. Reed and N. Price. It felt cold, almost clinical. But that's what it needed to be. No emotion, no narrative, just facts. I dragged the screenshot in, renamed it Exhibit A Instagram photo. Checked metadata, confirmed timestamp intact, geotag preserved. Years in compliance taught me if it isn't documented, it doesn't exist. Tonight, it existed. I opened a new document and began typing a narrative summary. Subject 1, Samantha Reed, Marketing Department. Observed in physical contact with direct manager Nathan Price at off-site location, non-business context, September 2022. Possible violation of fraternization policy, conflict of interest policy, and misuse of resources, expense reimbursement suspected. Exhibit A attached. The words read sterile detached. But beneath them was betrayal that blurred personal and professional lines. I moved to draft the email. Anonymous submission routed through the compliance relay server. To HR Investigations Team, subject potential policy violation, Marketing Department. Body please review attached Exhibit A. Photo depicts Senior Manager Nathan Price with subordinate Samantha Reed at Pike Street Bar, Tuesday, September 2022, approximately 7:30 p.m. Behavior inconsistent with fraternization and conflict of interest policies. Recommend review of expense reimbursements and relevant communications. Anonymous report for investigation. I reread the draft twice, scanning for tone. Too emotional, no. It read like any complaint I had vetted over the years, clinical, unflinching, sufficient to trigger review. Attachment Exhibit A. I hovered over send. This was the line. Once pressed, the machine would awaken gears grinding quietly in HR offices, analysts pulling receipts, investigators combing emails. Samantha would keep smiling, thinking her story intact, while in reality, she was already under review. I thought of her laugh in that photo. The tilt of her head. How casually she had lied to me with a text while settling into Nathan's lap. My finger pressed send. The email vanished, routed into HR's secure queue. I leaned back in my chair. For a long moment, I just listened to the rain. The townhouse, normally too quiet, now felt like an ally. I pictured Samantha somewhere across the city, another drink in hand, convinced she had pulled off another story. She didn't know the rules she had broken, but I did. And in this company, rules weren't suggestions. I returned to the case file and added another note. Note: subject remains unaware of complaint. Maintain outward normalcy. Purpose: preserve evidence integrity, avoid alerting subjects. I saved the file encrypted, locked. The timestamp on my system marked the beginning of the investigation. Around 1 a.m., headlights flashed across the window as a car passed. I closed my laptop and sat back. The silence pressed in, but I wasn't uneasy. I felt steadier than I had in months. This wasn't anger. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. In compliance, the most effective enforcement is invisible. People live their lives oblivious until the rules they broke finally snap shut around them. Samantha had stepped into the trap herself. All I had done was document it. I poured a glass of water, stood at the window. Seattle shimmered in the night towers, lit streets, wet the hum of a city that never sleeps. Somewhere in that sprawl, Samantha was laughing unaware. Nathan was preening unaware. And HR, faceless and methodical, would soon begin their work. I turned away, climbed into bed alone. The sheets felt colder than usual, but I didn't mind. For the first time since slipping the engagement ring on her finger, I slept without doubt. The sound of the lock clicking pulled me from sleep. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand, 2 a.m. Samantha's heels tapped across the hardwood floor, unsteady paired with the faint jingle of keys. I lay still, listening. The air carried traces of perfume and liquor clinging to her as she slipped into the bedroom. She set her purse down, whispering an exaggerated sigh. "Sorry, babe," she murmured as though exhaustion excused everything. "Deadlines. We worked late." Her voice was syrupy, practiced. I rolled slightly, just enough to meet her eyes. "Sounds tough," I said softly. She smiled faintly, relieved I hadn't pressed. Within minutes, she was asleep, back turned, her breathing heavy. I stared at the ceiling, calm, because I knew while she slept, HR's inbox was already filling with evidence. Morning brought light rain and the smell of brewing coffee. I stood in the kitchen pouring 2 mugs when Samantha walked in, hair tied up, wearing her usual morning smile. She wrapped her robe tighter and kissed my cheek. "Thanks," she said, reaching for her mug. "Yesterday was brutal. You wouldn't believe the revisions we had to do." Her tone was casual, her lie polished from practice. I nodded, sipping my coffee. "Hope today's easier." She exhaled dramatically. "God, I hope so." She thought she had convinced me. That was the brilliance of maintaining normalcy. The more I played along, the more reckless she would become. By 9 a.m., I was at my desk downtown. Screens lit up, emails poured in. The office looked ordinary, staff hurrying to meetings, keyboards, clacking phones, buzzing. But beneath the routine, a quiet shift had begun. HR moved like shadows. Their blinds were drawn. Meeting rooms were booked under vague titles: internal review, cross-department audit. No one noticed except those trained to. I passed one HR manager in the hallway. She smiled politely, papers pressed against her chest. The kind of smile that said nothing and everything at once. I knew what was happening. Samantha and Nathan were now subjects. The gears had started turning. That evening, Samantha returned home at 8, tossing her bag onto the couch. She kicked off her heels, stretched, then walked to the kitchen. "Another crazy day," she said, pulling a wine glass from the cabinet. She poured generously, the red swirling almost to the rim. "Deadlines again?" I asked, keeping my tone even. She laughed, tired. "When aren't there deadlines? Nathan's relentless. He wants everything perfect." I leaned against the counter, nodding. "Sounds demanding." She sipped, sighing. "You have no idea." But I did, and so would HR soon enough. Later that night, as she dozed on the couch, I opened my laptop quietly. I didn't need to add new evidence. I just wanted to review. The case file glowed on the screen, clean, structured. Exhibit A, in place, narrative, written complaint sent. I added a single line. Subjects continue to provide false verbal accounts at home. Integrity of investigation preserved. Recommend no confrontation to maintain evidence flow. I closed the laptop, satisfied. The days that followed were a study in dual realities. To Samantha, life went on. She texted me from the office, sprinkled with emojis, saying she'd be late again. She gossiped over dinner about coworkers, never realizing her words sounded like testimony. To me, every word was confirmation. Every excuse, another note in the file, another stone on the scale. Nathan, too, showed signs. I watched him in meetings, his smile a fraction, too forced, his pauses longer. He looked over his shoulder more often, like a man sensing the storm but unable to locate the thunder. One night, Samantha stumbled through the door later than ever. 2 a.m. again. She dropped onto the bed, breath heavy with alcohol perfume clinging. I covered her with a blanket, not out of love, but out of patience. She thought she was winning. In reality, she was documenting her own downfall with every careless step. The week after I pressed send stretched long and deliberate. To Samantha, it was just another work week in Seattle, rain misting the sidewalks, commuters packed on buses, deadlines filling calendars. To me, it was a quiet play, unfolding one I had scripted with a single email. Monday. I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The lobby smelled of disinfectant and burnt coffee, a Monday ritual. My badge beeped at the turnstile, and I walked past HR's row of glass-walled offices. Normally, the blinds were open, projecting friendliness. That morning, they were drawn. Closed blinds in HR meant one thing: review. At 9, sharp chatter buzzed across the open floor. Samantha appeared in her usual swirl of perfume and latte, greeting her team with exaggerated cheer. Late night, but we pushed through, she announced as if rehearsed. They clapped politely. I sipped my coffee listening. She thought she was spinning a convincing story. What she didn't know was that HR had already flagged her expense report from that Tuesday night itemized charges from Pike Street Cocktails dinner rideshare. Quiet, methodical red flags lighting up a screen somewhere down the hall. Tuesday, lunch in the cafeteria offered another show. I sat alone with a book propped open, though my eyes rarely touched the page. Nathan entered, tray in hand. Normally, he commanded a room, his laughter spilling over tables. That day, he lingered at the salad bar, his smile brittle, his eyes restless. I watched as he finally sat down alone, stabbing at his food without appetite. Pressure had found him. In compliance, you learn the look of a man sensing scrutiny. He didn't know where it was coming from, but he could feel the walls tightening. Wednesday, I passed 2 HR associates in the hallway. They whispered over a folder, voices hushed, until they noticed me. The moment they saw my badge, their tone shifted to polite neutrality. They didn't know I was the complainant. That was the beauty of anonymity. That evening, Samantha stumbled through the front door at 8, tossing her heels aside. She poured herself a heavy glass of wine before I could ask. "You wouldn't believe today," she groaned. "Nathan's breathing down everyone's neck. He wants revisions on revisions. It's like he's cracking." I handed her a glass of water alongside the wine. "Maybe he's under pressure," I said. She scoffed, gulping wine. "He lives on pressure. But this is different. Like someone's watching him." Her words almost drew a smile from me. Thursday, whispers began traveling sideways across the office. No one asked Nathan directly, but I caught fragments. HR's been in conference rooms all week. Why are they pulling expense reports from last month? Fear never spreads head-on in corporations. It always moves laterally, like a current people pretend not to feel. At home, Samantha filled the kitchen with chatter, pretending exhaustion, laughing too loud when I asked how her day went. She thought noise disguised lies. In reality, it only highlighted them. Friday, the first real crack appeared. Mid-meeting, a junior associate misclicked a slide, jumbling numbers on a chart. Nathan erupted. "Do you even prepare before meetings?" His voice carried sharper than the mistake deserved. The room froze. Samantha forced a laugh, patting the associate's arm, her eyes darting nervously around the table. Nathan realized his slip too late, rubbing his forehead, trying to recover. I wrote a simple note in my pocket notebook. Manager exhibiting stress response in open forum. Witnessed by team. In compliance, stress responses often mark the beginning of unraveling. Weekend, Saturday. Samantha suggested dinner out. We ended up at a small Italian place near Capitol Hill. Candlelight reflected in her glass of wine. She spoke of wanting a vacation. "After this campaign wraps, we should go somewhere warm," she said, her smile stretching too wide. I nodded, eating slowly, letting her words wash past. She spoke as if nothing had changed, as if the walls weren't closing in, but they were. I looked at her across the table and thought of how strange it was, watching someone act out a part in a play they didn't know had already ended. There's a quiet satisfaction in watching a system work. HR was the machine, and I had turned the key. Gears ground forward invisibly, analysts reviewing logs, investigators tracing receipts, managers called into routine check-ins that were anything but routine. And Samantha, sitting across from me with bright eyes and false hope, had no idea she was already inside that machine. The second week of HR's investigation began like any other in Seattle: gray skies, hanging low drizzle slicking the sidewalks, umbrellas bumping outside crowded coffee shops. Yet inside the office, something intangible shifted. Conversations that once flowed easily now broke off when Nathan entered a room. Samantha's laugh, normally free and unguarded, rose too sharp, too practiced. The facade of normalcy was splintering. Tuesday, I was in the break room pouring coffee when Samantha appeared, makeup neatly applied, but fatigue clinging to her posture. She leaned against the counter, sighing heavily. Nathan's unbearable this week, she said, not bothering with small talk. It's like he's punishing us, piling on revisions non-stop. I stirred my coffee slowly. Maybe he's just under pressure. She shook her head, eyes narrowing. No, this is different. It's like someone's watching him. Her words almost pulled a smile from me. Someone was watching. Just not the way she imagined. Wednesday? That afternoon, I attended a strategy session as compliance liaison. The marketing team filled the glass-walled conference room. Nathan stood at the front presenting slides. His collar looked too tight. His tone clipped. Midway through, a junior associate stumbled over a chart misreading figures. Nathan snapped. "Do you even prepare before meetings?" His voice cracked through the air, sharper than the mistake deserved. The room froze. Samantha let out a forced laugh, placing a hand on the associate's arm as if to soften the blow. Nathan rubbed his forehead, realizing too late the damage. Silence stretched longer than his apology. I scribbled a line into my notebook, manager showing elevated stress response in open meeting, witnessed by team. Clinical words, but I knew what they meant. Cracks were widening. Wednesday night, back home, I settled into my study. Rain tapped against the townhouse windows. My phone buzzed. A message from Samantha. Nathan is losing it. Everyone's on edge. Can't wait for this to be over. I saved the screenshot into the case file. Exhibit B wasn't necessary, but patterns matter in compliance. A single complaint may be dismissed. A series becomes undeniable. I typed a quick note under the saved image. Subject: complains of manager's instability, aligns with observed behaviors in meetings. Then I closed the file, calm. Thursday. By the next morning, whispers ran through the floor. Why is HR checking last month's expenses? Why are they in the conference room every day? Nobody asked Nathan directly. Fear rarely moves upward in corporations. It spreads sideways, cautious coded. In the evening, Samantha stumbled into the townhouse, tossing her bag onto the couch with more force than usual. She pulled a wine glass from the cabinet and filled it too high. "You wouldn't believe today," she said, collapsing into a chair. Nathan barked at two people, then stormed out of a meeting. Everyone's speculating. Feels like we're under a microscope. I leaned against the counter, sipping water. Sounds rough. She exhaled, clearly grateful for what she thought was sympathy. She didn't realize every word was another thread weaving itself into the investigation's net. Friday. Nathan walked past my office that afternoon. His eyes flicked toward me, lingering for a half second before darting away. His shoulders were tense, his stride clipped. He looked like a man aware of a predator he couldn't see. That was the thing about HR's invisible hand. Subjects felt its pressure long before they understood its shape. Weekend? On Saturday, Samantha suggested brunch in Capitol Hill. She dressed brightly, painting over fatigue with makeup and laughter. At the cafe, sunlight filtered through the window, warming her glass of mimosa. She talked about needing a vacation. "After this campaign, let's fly somewhere warm," she said. Voice light, eyes darting away whenever work slipped into conversation. She wanted to act normal, to reclaim some illusion of balance. I nodded, fork poised over pancakes, letting her words wash past. She laughed too loudly at her own stories, changed subjects, quickly pressed for enthusiasm from me. But masks, no matter how polished, always slip. And hers was cracking. I took a photo of her brunch plate, an innocuous snapshot. Not evidence, not needed for the file, just a reminder to myself. A picture of how fragile performance can be when the stage is collapsing beneath it. The third week began with a stillness that wasn't natural. Seattle's rain had eased, leaving streets slick but quiet. Inside the office, however, the storm was breaking. Monday, the calendar pinged mid-morning. Mandatory HR meeting, marketing department. Half-an-hour blocks, names slotted in one after the other. Neutral phrasing that meant anything but neutral. Samantha walked to her desk with her usual latte, but her eyes flicked nervously toward her inbox. She scanned the invite, then forced a smile when I glanced her way. "Routine check-in," she said too quickly, like a rehearsed line. I nodded. Sure. She wanted me to believe. Or maybe she wanted to believe herself. Tuesday, Nathan was first. HR called him into a glass conference room with blinds drawn tight. He emerged 45 minutes later, jaw set, face pale. He didn't return to his desk. Instead, he walked straight out of the building, not even glancing at his team. Whispers followed him like smoke. By afternoon, the rumor had solidified suspension. I watched Samantha type furiously at her keyboard, pretending focus. Her hands trembled slightly. She kept glancing at her phone, waiting for a message that wouldn't come. That evening at home, she poured herself wine before taking off her coat. "Nathan's under review," she said casually, as if discussing weather. "People are overreacting." I stirred the pasta on the stove, replying simply, "These things happen." Her eyes searched mine, waiting for reassurance. I offered none. Wednesday, her turn. HR called her in mid-morning. She adjusted her blazer in the reflection of the elevator door, smiled too brightly at colleagues as she walked past. I watched her disappear into the conference room, the door closing behind her. For 40 minutes, she was inside. When she returned, her smile was thinner, her steps quicker. She slid into her chair, eyes fixed on her monitor, typing with mechanical precision. At lunch, she sat across from me in the cafeteria. It was nothing she said between bites, just routine. "They do these every year." "Of course," I said, chewing slowly. Her laugh was sharp, brittle. "You don't look convinced." I shrugged. "You said it was routine." The silence stretched. Thursday. By now the office had shifted fully. Colleagues lowered their voices around Samantha. Conversations stopped when she entered. Even her closest allies in marketing began to keep distance, afraid of being associated. Nathan's absence loomed larger than his presence ever had. His office door stayed closed, blinds shut. HR escorted someone in mid-afternoon to collect files. I watched from my glass-walled office as they carried boxes out. The sight was familiar. I'd overseen similar removals in other cases. But this time, it wasn't just professional. It was personal vindication. Friday. At home that evening, Samantha sat curled on the couch, wine glass in hand. She looked at me with wide eyes, trying to sound casual. "Everyone's so paranoid," she said. "HR's just doing a sweep. It'll blow over." I folded laundry slowly, methodically, before answering. "Maybe," she pressed. "You don't think... I mean, you know I'm fine, right?" I looked at her for a long moment. She squirmed under the silence. Finally, I said, "If you're fine, you're fine." She exhaled in relief, clinging to words I hadn't actually given. Saturday. We walked through Pike Place Market, crowds weaving around us. Samantha bought flowers, smiling at vendors, laughing a little too loudly. She clutched the bouquet like a shield. I carried the bag of produce, silent, watching her play her part. She wanted the world to see normal. But I knew the stage lights were dimming. There is a precision in corporate justice that feels almost surgical. No shouting, no spectacle. Just quiet steps, a meeting here, a suspension there, a door closed, a desk cleared. I didn't need to intervene anymore. The machine was doing what it was designed to do. By November, the machine had finished its work. HR released their findings in a bland memo circulated only to leadership. The language was sterile: policy violations, confirmed corrective action, taken, managerial oversight, terminated. Nathan Price's name was never printed, but everyone knew. His office was emptied. His badge deactivated, his photo removed from the leadership wall. Samantha's name wasn't there either, but the silence surrounding her was louder than any memo. Colleagues avoided eye contact. Invitations dried up. She still walked into the building each morning, chin raised, smile stretched, but the laughter that once followed her had vanished. At home, she tried to play normal. She cooked dinners she never used to cook. Lit candles in the townhouse filled the air with chatter. But cracks ran through every gesture. One evening, she set pasta on the table, her hands trembling just enough to rattle the silverware. "It's almost over," she said, forcing confidence. "They don't have anything on me." I twirled spaghetti on my fork, meeting her eyes calmly. "If you're fine, you're fine." She dropped her gaze, chewing without appetite. By December, she broke. We sat in the living room, rain streaking the windows. She clutched a wine glass ring, catching the lamplight. "Tell me you believe me," she whispered, voice thin. I stayed silent. Her breath hitched. "Dave, please." I stood, walked to the study, and returned with a small box. I placed it on the coffee table. Inside lay the engagement ring, her face drained of color. "You don't have to explain," I said softly. "You already did." Tears welled, but no words came. She slipped the ring off her finger, set it into the box with shaking hands. The silence was final. I moved through the townhouse in the days that followed, steady, methodical. Bills in my name, mortgage mine alone, utilities untouched. She had no claim, no footing. She packed her things into suitcases, clothes spilling as carelessly as when she first moved in. The night she left, she stood at the door, suitcase handle in hand. "I never thought you'd be the one to end it quietly," she said, almost bitter. I looked at her evenly. Quiet doesn't mean weak. She turned, walked into the rain, and disappeared down the street. In the weeks after, I found peace in routine. Morning coffee, evening walks, files neatly stacked on my desk. HR closed the investigation, sealing documents in digital archives. Life in the office resumed, but Samantha's presence had shrunk to a shadow, still technically there, but hollow, excluded. She sat alone at her desk, phone untouched, laughter gone. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The system had done what I trusted it to do. One evening, I sat at my study window, watching Seattle's skyline shimmer through drizzle. I thought of how it all began: an Instagram post, a careless smile, a hand on the wrong shoulder. A single photo had set everything in motion. Justice, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sits quietly in an inbox, a complaint written without emotion, a lever pulled without fanfare. And sometimes that whisper changes everything. When people imagine betrayal, they picture shouting matches, slammed doors, shattered glass. My story didn't end that way. It ended in silence, the kind that carries more weight than noise ever could. I kept the townhouse I had bought long before Samantha entered my life. I kept my career, the reputation I had built over years of discipline. And more importantly, I kept my calm. Samantha left with nothing. No ring, no credibility at work, no foothold to claim. Nathan disappeared altogether, his name wiped from leadership like he had never existed. There was no need for dramatic confrontation. I never raised my voice, never begged for explanations. The rules were enough. I trusted the system I had given my life to, and in the end, it protected me. The lesson: sometimes the strongest revenge isn't loud retaliation. It's distance boundaries and the quiet certainty that truth will surface on its own. So I sit here now, rain falling softly against my Seattle window, knowing justice was served without a single shout. If you were in my shoes, would you have chosen silence over spectacle? I'd love to read your take in the comments. And if stories like this resonate with you, make sure to subscribe. There are plenty more to come.